We're going to get started. So thank you so much for being here. I have Rex Dean with us. And Rex, would you like to tell us about yourself?
Sure. I'm a filmmaker in Los Angeles now, um, who just finished his first feature film called Space Baby. Um, it stars my three kids, and it took 26 years to finish. So the film was shot on 35 millimeter because there was no such thing as HD back then, or Google, or YouTube, or Facebook. None of those things existed. iPhones. The only thing we had were, film cameras. Anyway, so I'm really excited. It screened. It had its premiere at the Chinese Theater in LA in June with Dances with Films. Is a great festival, and they have started a New York version. This is their second year, and the film is screening on Sunday, December 3rd in Union Square for Dances with Films.
That is so exciting. And I actually know some people in New York, so I can post about that. That way, maybe they can come check it out.
I would love it. And it's a really beautiful, spiritual, uplifting film that I think your friends, I should give a money back guarantee. If anyone's not happy, I'll give their money back. But everyone seems to love it. So,
That's awesome. Yeah, so speaking of spiritual, that's one of the reasons I wanted you a guest on here because what I like to combine is a lot of my passions, which includes film stuff. For me, it's acting, but anyone who's involved in filmmaking has my heart, and spirituality, self-development, relationships, things like this. So I love that you're combining film with spirituality. So without giving any spoilers or giving anything away, can you talk about how spirituality is involved in your film?
um, oh, sure. No, the whole film is, in a way, it's like a sci-fi comedy adventure that is an excuse to really try to get a message across, which is that um, taking care of each other is all that matters. And so I would say that, and 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 it's about a little boy wanting to connect to the universe, to become the smartest kid in the world and figure out the secret of life. And and you realize that that is the definition of spirituality: is how do you feel connected to the planet, to the universe, to each other? And I would say the basis of it, I think, like spirituality, if you were born alone on the moon, it would be very tough to figure out a path to feeling good about yourself. I think spirituality is based on community and on relationships. Um, yeah, the film's about these two little kids and their friendship with an old black ball player who lives next door, and they they actually, it took me like 20 years to realize this. As a filmmaker, you think you're writing a film from a perspective, and you think I'm trying to make a point in some way, and you realize that your characters are who they are and they make their own points, and you don't you and so in some ways I'm disappointed in the way religion has worked on the planet, as far as creating fights and things. And so in one way the film kind of questions the value of religion. The main character is a mad scientist who's an atheist, and his little sister worships nature and thinks God is a woman. And then their best friend is an angel who practices all religions. He's not allowed to take sides.
I love this.
So what you realize is that they can still be best friends. It doesn't matter that they believe different things. And but they all come together to fight this evil nurse who works for the devil and is an actual fascist. She's been alive for hundreds of years, and was we we did all these things. We made scrapbooks for the angel. Like, he's been alive for 300 years. He was Abraham Lincoln's mentor, and so he'll ask the kids, "Hey, you heard about the Emancipation Proclamation of 1863?" And little kids will say, "Yeah, freed the slaves." He'll say, "That was my idea," you know. And there's pictures of him with Malcolm X and Martin Luther King, and Einstein writes, "Thanks for the idea," So he's this mentor to all the great civil rights leaders. But at the same time, Evil Nurse Nancy, they're flipping through a book on fascists and concentration camps, and you see her head pasted onto Goering's body. Like it's funny, but it's also, this nurse represents kind of greed and um, on not caring about each other. She's supposed to run a rest home for old people, and all she really does is tries to kill them and collect insurance money and things like that. Um, so it's both funny, but it also, if you understand anything, it makes a lot of points.
Mm. Yeah, almost like a commentary.
Yeah, but luckily it's so goofy and
Hmm.
surreal that you have to watch it like 4 times to really get all the subtext. So
Mm.
uh, it really works as a kid's film as well. I mean, you know, it's just a colorful, crazy things happening. And then if you know anything, you're like, there's a lot more to think about.
So would you say the main audience would be it's for children, and then it's one of those things that it's like a family film because there's something in it for everyone. So if adults watch it, they'll absolutely resonate with it.
I didn't know who the main audience was. I kind of thought it was for children, and then I wanted to sneak ideas into their heads, like that the only superpower that matters is taking care of each other. These little kids think they're superheroes, but that's really the only thing that matters. And so, but after screening it, the overall audience reaction was that it isn't really a kids' film. It's definitely a family film. It's definitely safe for grandparents to see and little kids to see. Um, but that there's definitely a consensus that it's for spiritual people. That if you have any kind of interest in this, your soul or in religion or in community or anything like that, that it's that's who it's for. So we're in the right place talking to you.
Yeah, this is great. It's awesome how much we are aligned with a lot of the things we think about. And what's funny is for a lot of years, I've been writing down notes whenever someone says something. I'm like, oh, that's great. And I feel like I'm somehow going to need to incorporate it into my business somehow. I just write it down. I've been writing things down for like maybe 10 years or something, and I've never actually gone back. So I have a lot of things that I need to edit and figure something out. So I'm in that habit. And so that's the way my brain works. Like, oh, this is good. I should write this down. So this is my first time like truly taking action. And I started this podcast and I didn't know all the details of getting it started. And finally I said, I just need to pick a date and get started. And so this is the date. I,
Beautiful.
and so what's awesome, what I'm experiencing right now is this weird feeling of you're saying things. And I'm like, oh, that's good. Almost like that impulse, like, oh, that's good. I should write that down. And I'm like,
Like,
oh my God, I don't have to. Finally, it's gonna be broadcast.
oh, good.
So thank you so much
Yeah,
for expressing these things that it's thoughts that I have that I don't really know how to put into words. So I think that's why I'm so excited to have guests on the podcast that I know are aligned, but that have their own voice, their own way of saying things that I know that I'll support.
yeah. No, I can't wait for you to see the film because we met after the screening here.
Yeah.
But it's I feel like I could make like 100 T-shirts from the quotes out of the film that are just, really some beautiful things about what matters. There's one that a lot of people liked, which is truth is just a word people use when they've decided to stop looking for answers.
Wow.
You know, so when you
It's like mic drop after that. Oh my God. That's just one.
that's just one. So that what's
Wow.
fun is that these little kids' conversation with their old friend has, I mean, a lot of it, a good half of it is, or you could say, I mean, everything is stolen from the great wisdom of all the ages. Um, you know, the, I mean, there's nothing really new under the sun, but this particular story has definitely never been told. Um, and the thing is, there's nothing really to give away. I mean, the movie is about talking to the universe and learning to talk to your own heart. Um, and it ends with a beautiful quote, which I think is a Native American quote. I mean, I obviously rewrite things, but this little kid says, "I want to find out the meaning of life." He's a mad scientist, and the equation that, answers all questions like Einstein wanted to do. And he ends the film by saying, when you love someone little, because the film is called Space Baby, and it's about this baby is the new soul for the earth. These kids want to get a new soul for the earth. They say when you love someone little, you don't have to wonder about the meaning of life. It's staring you right in the face.
Very
Now,
nice.
yeah, and it's interesting. It plays into our DNA, which wants us to love children. But I do think taking care of each other is, all that matters. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really great. I love that. So I'm going to get into the questions that I plan on asking everybody that I bring on. So we'll see how it goes. Let me just find them. Okay. So first, I wanted to introduce how we met, because one thing that I really want to get across to people is how important networking is, because this year I finally have built momentum after 11 years of being in the business. So I started my first film as the lead in a feature. I got my first agent, things like that. So a lot of those things happened because of people that I met in the past. So I just think it's important to share how people meet and how it's possible, because a lot of people know that it's not what you know, it's who you know, but they don't know how to know people. So if I share, how I've met all my guests, I think that would help people get some kind of inspiration for getting themselves out there. So with us, I would say it's not the most exciting story because we met at a networking event. But at the same time, it was really exciting because the reason I was even there was because I work as a casting associate for a casting director who invited me to this event that had a bunch of synchronicity of why she even was there and how we had somebody in common that kind of brought us together. And then from there, that weekend, we ended up at the downtown Los Angeles Film Festival, and I saw you again a couple of days in a row. So it was, I think that it's serendipitous, and I'm curious how you found out about that event, like what brought you there.
Honestly, I can't remember, but I have so many friends. So I've been here 6 years, and yeah, started out knowing really nobody,
Wow.
and now I've had hundreds of people over to events and parties at my house, and uh, and I always look at it as a kind of community service, just bringing people together. And so people reciprocate. So on lists with friends of saying, "Hey, here's an event I heard about." Someone who was working on the downtown film festival, I think, told me about that party. I didn't really know that it was a networking party, but it just seemed like something fun to do with in a photographer's studio. And but I'll say the the biggest thing that you cannot do if you want to succeed is to isolate yourself. And the other day, someone sent me an invitation to a anime screening of this a director called Shinkai from Japan, and it's an anime called Suzumi. And apparently, it's the most successful one ever. It's done $325 million, which doesn't really matter because it was, the money doesn't matter, but it's just an incredibly beautiful film. And I realized that what I had made, my film is like a live action anime, because the best anime are very spiritual. They talk about people's connection to the world. There's, forces of nature. They're always, they're often with forest animals and things like that.
Right.
And this one was kind of trying to deal with the devastating earthquakes that had happened in Japan in 2011, but metaphorically. And the director had done it dealt with so many themes that I had dealt with in my film, and it symbolically, even the trying to show what a connection to the universe might look like. He had made some choices that were in the same ballpark as I did, and I was like, really made me proud of my film. And the director was there, and he was kind of mobbed for people giving getting autographs. And I was like, I should have brought a postcard or something I could have given him to say, like, I think you'd like this film. But it was too mob. So I walked out, and there was an older gentleman at the door just saying arigato, arigato, thank you to everybody. And and I just said, hey, were you one of the filmmakers? And he said, well, actually, I'm the owner of the studio that made
Hmm.
that film.
Wow.
Like the DreamWorks,
Wow.
and um, and so I said, well, I made this film that took me 26 years that I would love for this director to see because I think it would, you know, it has a similar spiritual, nature. And he said, in every production meeting, he never mentions anything about spirituality ever. He said, but everything he says is spiritual,
Hmm.
which is really beautiful. And so
Hmm.
I told him about it and I showed him a little of my trailer and he's like, well, look, here's how to contact me. Send me a link to your trailer and I will share it with him and, we'll see what happens. And I went out that night. The point is, I guess, that I'd been invited to this. I asked my two kids who were in town because they love anime. Oh, they couldn't go. I asked like 8 friends. Nobody could go with me. And I thought, I just felt like I'm going to go because I think it'll blow my mind, that something will happen. And so not only did I see the film that made me understand my own film better, but I made this nice connection with the head of a studio who, I'm sure could say the word. And I realized my film might do better in Japan because it is more. So that sort of impetus to, yeah, I think there are some kind of parties you go to that are, you begin to feel like they're not productive.
Hmm.
But even sometimes, I've gone to parties that, networking events, and just the, one person I meet will become a really good friend and we'll sing together or, whatever. Just so it's a really interesting thing because I like you, maybe I was never super social before I got here. And it's um, it's just it's a nice thing that people are, like we could possibly, use you in our next film. Let's stay in touch. Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of which, yeah, absolutely. If you ever need an actress.
Of course.
Yeah. So, okay, so you said it took 26 years to make this film. So can you please elaborate on that? Because I've heard of a lot of films taking a while in pre-production and things like that, but I'm dying to hear the situation here.
Well, this one, I tried to make $100 million film for really the craft services budget of a big film, or the composer's budget. A friend gave me $500,000, and the and we shot it for maybe 400,000. The film, if nowadays you can put all your film on a single memory card, but back then the 35 millimeter film was $130,000 alone for the film and the processing, and it's enough to fill a pretty large van. But anyway, so it cost that money, and but the friend who gave it to me was a college friend who had made like $1 billion on Wall Street, and he's like, "Hey, if you need more money, just let me know." And I'm like, "Awesome! What a better friend could you have?" Well, he had AIDS, and he died, not long after we finished shooting, and I had bit off more than I could chew. It's a very, it's got like 20 minutes of visual effects in the end, and it needed, a lot more money and collaborators and all that. So I worked on it for 2 or 3 more years and got it to the point that it made sense. But I was also raising kids and had to get them through school and college and all that. And because my investor was dead, I decided I would just put it on hold until my kids grew up and got jobs. And so that took about 15 years. And so about 5 years ago, I started being able to keep my own money instead of put it into college tuition and things.
Mm.
And I started putting it into the post production and hired a little more visual effects and got the film scanned and color graded and helped with sound mix. But I also spent probably about 10 years of my own time doing things that if I'd had a bigger budget, I would have hired others to do.
Mm.
Um, so it was really about a 10-year project, but I had to put it aside for 15 years.
Wow. That's a really good example or like case in point of why people shouldn't give up on their dreams because even if it takes a really long time. As I said, it took me 11 years to start building momentum in my career. And I mean, that's quite a story. I'm really happy you didn't give up. And now that you actually have this film to be able to show, I'm sure you are very happy that you continued with it regardless of how long it took.
Yeah, because I got it to the point where I love it, and it turns out a lot of other people who watch it love it, and so I'm really really happy. And honestly, I do thank in the credits some friends who ideally you have friends who say, hey, focus, get this thing done. Even if it takes you a couple more years of
Yeah.
sitting there, removing dust or color grading or whatever, just focus, because it's many of us are kind of ADD and lose focus. And so I'm super glad that I finished it. And now I'm focused on getting it into festivals and just getting it out to as many millions of people as I can.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, so thanks for sharing that. And I was also curious. So you mentioned that you do singing and you're a director, right?
Yeah, I wrote and directed it. Yeah.
Wrote and directed. Yeah, I was curious, what other forms of creativity do you have in your life?
Uh, just kind of endless. Like a friend of mine from college gave up being an eye surgeon to become a painter. And she started getting paintings, sold for $10,000 and into galleries. And I thought, well, if she can do it, so can I. And so I got some paints and I started painting. This is probably about 10 years ago. And I painted for 2 months, and I really loved what I made. I had a big house in Boston. I put up like 50 paintings all over my house. I didn't want to sell any. And I also I also realized, but I saw where I fit. Like I'm someone who can paint okay, not as great as she did, not as great as any, greats. And I just thought I could do this for months and years, but it's not really gonna, it was never gonna pay the bills. And so I stopped that. But, I love stained glass, and so someone, told me that a piece like this took them 4 months. And I thought, 4 months, I'm not gonna do that. But I started making mosaics on bulletproof glass, this Lexan that's very thick and half an inch. And it's almost like tile work in a bathroom. If you glue stained glass on, which you have to get from Italy, which is very like $60 for a handful,
Mm.
because like beer bottles don't work. And then you grout it, and then you light it from behind. You've created this beautiful little universe of stained glass. Um, I like doing electronics. I'm a computer programmer, is how I pay my bills. So that's a very creative thing.
Mm.
Uh, so yeah, I'll show you. Let me show you something real quick that I did
Okay.
for the premiere. Doc Martens had given us all the shoes for the kids in the festival. I
Oh,
mean, in the
for
film.
the film. Hmm.
And my daughter had these little boots, and they're very, the Doc Martens are featured like Space Baby wears these gorgeous silver baby boots.
Ooh.
My daughter had these little boots that had blue fish on them. And I was so jealous. So I got some shoes at a flea market a few months ago, and I copied that design and I wore these to the premiere of the film.
Oh,
And you can just cut out sponges to make little fishes, and so I always loved like dropping my kids off at preschool, and I would hang out and do crafts with them uh,
oh,
before I left. Um, so yeah, I've written articles, and basically every day is some pretty creative thing going on.
yeah. Yeah. So you exercise your creativity every day. That's really beautiful. So, more questions I have for you would be, let's see. So, I was wondering if you have a go-to morning routine. I know it might sound like kind of a random question, but the reason I'm asking is because, like I said, I like to combine everything, and self-development is one of those things. So, I think that um, not everyone has a morning routine, but those who do tend to swear by it as if that's what gets their energy flowing for the whole day. So, I'm curious if you have one.
I mean, I think it's a hugely important question, and the answer is sometimes I do.
Right. Me too, sometimes.
And I wrote I don't know, like I started songwriting about 4 years ago, and I just fell in love with it. And when if I wake up and I work for 2 hours on songs, it makes me really happy in it. And what happens is you get tired later in the day, and so that you can find there are best times of day to work. But there's there's two things. One, there's who hasn't read it should read um, the 4 Hour Work Week, as well as Rich Dad Poor Dad, which is a great book. But the 4 Hour Work Week suggests that if you really focus, maybe offload some things, live simpler, you can work less so that you can work way more on things you love. And the guy who wrote the book wanted to be like a ballroom dancer. And so he got his work whittled down to 4 hours a week. And then he wrote the 4 Hour Cookbook, I think. And I only usually read the first couple chapters of things because I lose the books and I'm kind of ADD like that.
You
But
lose the books.
yeah, uh, that's how, I have like 400 methods of organizing that I use for like 2 days, and then I lose the list or the book. But, we try. But the 4 Hour Cookbook suggested um, keeping life real simple and just always having the exact same thing every day. And so my morning routine, I make like 8 days of oatmeal with apples and bananas and cinnamon and walnuts. And I have like a big pan of it. And that's what I have in the morning. And then some coffee with collagen in it and MCT oil,
Mhm.
which is from um, palm trees? No, coconut. And and I have that. And then at lunch every day I have a huge bunch of vegetables and a omelet. And so I never ever have to think about it. So I can just focus on what I'm doing. And then for dinner I'll make something. But I think that sort of chunking time um, of devoting the morning to creative things is important. And my problem is that I've got a film I'm writing and a TV series, and I've got an album I'm trying to finish. I'm trying
Wow.
to market my film, and I often just come to the piano and just play because it makes it just the energy of that, of just passing sound through me, cheers me up. Um, but anyway, so the answer is sometimes I have a great morning routine, and I'm always trying to remember to. Um, I do try to avoid doing stupid stuff like, paying bills or dealing with dumb stuff. Um,
Paying bills is stupid.
no, in the morning, like any
Oh.
tedious, do that when you're burned out or tired, and then anyway, you ignore them anyway. But yeah, because I think often our best energy is in the morning. A lot of people think that. So why? How about you? What do you do?
I don't have a consistent one, but what I've done that has worked in the past is waking up early and immediately having a hot beverage. So usually it's coffee, but sometimes I'll experiment with other things like a mushroom coffee, mud water, or tea. So immediately having the hot beverage that will entice me to get out of bed and reading while I drink that hot beverage, and then journaling,
Hmm.
and then trying to do some sort of physical movement. So usually that would be stretching or yoga. And then having breakfast, which when I was doing this routine, my breakfast was a smoothie every morning. And then showering. Yep. And then after showering, I feel fresh and ready to go for my day.
Well, that's great. Yeah, the one thing I remember every once in a while when I'm really not getting out of bed is Tony Robbins' advice, which is just get out of bed and move, just do something. Um, and then the journaling or the meditation is definitely something that I should do more because I forget. I'll just forget that I'm a filmmaker and that I have a film to sell. I'll just think I'm going to sing some songs, or I'll forget the other way around, and I just ignore whole parts of my life. Whereas, if you're really good at lists and you say, here's my goals today, and it's a little bit of that and a little bit of that, it only takes consistent, a little bit of anything. I've had friends who would write for an hour a day and they're done with a novel in a year,
Wow.
and that's really what it takes. But if you write for an hour and for 2 days, and then you put it off for 6 weeks, and then nothing gets done.
Right.
So no,
Yeah.
important.
Yeah, time management was something I always had trouble with, but then I heard it worded differently, and I heard it worded as energy management, and I find that super
Mhm.
interesting, and I think that it's kind of the same thing, and it is super important, and a lot of people struggle with that. So I'm glad that you brought that up. That's something that I would love to talk about on this podcast somewhat regularly to remind people about that. As far as meditating in the morning, I have a very hard time doing that because it will make me fall back to sleep.
Mhm. Yeah,
So
no, for sure. I take that.
yeah,
One thing
so
that a friend just that I don't every once I don't know where these facts come from, but my phone will tell me, "Oh, you spend an average of 38 minutes a day on Instagram." And I'm like, "Holy moly, how did that happen? I don't think I spend 5 minutes."
mm,
Well, another friend has told me that you can actually set it to only allow yourself 5 minutes.
wow.
Because 38 minutes a day is enough to write a novel, and I mean, I'm getting something out of Instagram, I guess, sometimes, but to put that much of your life into, browsing on your phone when you do have other goals. Because I would say you know, I know you want to talk about balance and things like that. And I would say like my life's great, except that I'm ambitious to make the world a better place, to try to have some impact. And so I suffer from not getting enough done on projects that will allow me to help people feel less alone or more connected or less evil. Um, so yeah.
I'm curious for you to elaborate on that. So are you saying it's kind of a long-term goal, but you haven't figured out how to get it done, or you know how to get it done and you haven't put the time towards it?
Well, no, I mean it is. I think many of my friends' goals are to spread peace and love in some way, or just the to spread good ideas and kindness and taking care of each other. And taking care of yourself and figuring out how to, you know, get your bills paid and live, in a community, et cetera. But um, so I think a lot of us are doing that, but it's the question of how well or how much. Um, so I do I have a, I think that if we, uh, I mean, this is the theory is that let's say that right now I reach 50 people, or 300 came to my screening, and in New York another 100 will come. So total of 300 or 400 people will have seen my film. Um, I would love to, have 300 or 400 million people see it because it is a good message and it does make people feel uplifted and, maybe make them go and hug someone they love or
Mhm.
whatever. Um, and so that's what I mean. The figuring out how to, you know, just how to make a, I mean, there's two things. One, trying not to be evil yourself, which is not that hard. And that's good. That ripples, if you're trying to be a good person. But
Yeah.
then just trying to spread, like a lot of my songs are about, hey, maybe don't kill yourself today, you know?
Mm.
Um, like James Taylor and Carole King's song, like You've Got a Friend. Sometimes songs can just reach out to someone and just say, oh, I'm not alone, and so figuring out what is it going to be like, come up with 400 TikTok things and put them out one a day, probably, and try to build an audience that way. Um, but I feel compelled to share the the you know well the generosity that's been shown to me in life and the gifts that have been given to me in life. They were given by people, and I'm a person, and I want to share them back with other people and pass it on.
Mhm.
Um, and it's we all feel sorry for ourselves that there's not a machine studio, some big organism saying, hey, listen to this guy and his TV show or his movie or his song. And so just figuring out how to build a community is is interesting and challenging. And I'm very happy on a certain level, but I also am dissatisfied with the level of impact that I'm having on the world. So
Mm. Wow, that's profound. I relate to that. Sometimes I'll think I figured something out that's pretty big. And I think if only other people knew this. And so that is a really interesting place to be in, where, because a lot of people just haven't quite got it figured out. So for people who figured it out but don't know how to spread the message, that's its own challenge. So, not to get coachy on you, but have you thought about ways to get your message out there more?
Well, yeah, I actually just got a one thing that's kind of fun about my film. A lot of people who've seen it from, say, Brazil, they will say, now, surely you were on ayahuasca when you wrote this film, because it's really like there's a space station in the main character's mind, and he hears the universe and he talks to it, and it's really trippy. It's like breaking through to the other side and connecting. So, and I said, no, that's how my brain works. But but by chance, I was talking to some friends a couple months ago, and one of them said, and I said, oh, I kind of need a sales agent. I need a producer's rep. I need, somebody to help sell my film. And they said, oh, remember the dude in The Big Lebowski? I'm like, yeah, of course. Well, he was based on a real guy
Mm.
named Jeff Dowd, who helped Robert Redford start Sundance. And he was a sales agent. He was a producer's rep, sales agent. So I got home and I just Googled him just to see if he was still alive. And he was, and he has a partner, and they have, a producer's rep company. And so I submitted my film, and his partner got back to me and said, hey, this film looks like it wouldn't be that hard to sell. We would take you on.
Wow.
Um, and so I think I was answering your question, like, am I getting help? I mean, and yet, my theory is, so we've been talking to some people about doing kind of self-distribution, because I don't have any big famous people in my film. The main character, there's a Broadway actor named Charlie Brown, who was in this Negro ensemble theater company with Denzel and James Earl Jones and Viola Davis and every great black actor that ever went through New York, and they all really loved him. But he's dead. He died shortly after we finished filming at 52 or something like that.
Oh
50.
no.
And Peter Wolf from Jay Giles Band is in it. He was kind of a famous rock musician back in the 70s, but not too famous.
Hmm.
And there's just nobody, no big name actors. So distributors in America care, only about avoiding risk. And the way you do that is by getting name actors. And they have these spreadsheets, or, there's a list like Joe Blow is 497 on the list, and Sandra Smith is 2092. And you put those together and they think, well, in Greece, that'll make us, $10,000. And in France, it'll make it whatever. But if your cast aren't even on that spreadsheet, they don't think about the value of a film. They think about exactly how to market it using the name actors in the film. And, which is fine. That's how, you can't really change the world by wishing it. So, so I need to think of other ways. So we're thinking about doing some self-distribution, working with theaters. Like AMC has programs that if you can prove to them that you'll drive people to the theater, they can project it in, a few hundred theaters, and try to do that, and then try to get some press, and then get it onto one of the streaming platforms. Because what often happens with films these days is, though, there's all sorts of, say, 990 distributors who will take your film, invest nothing in marketing it, give you nothing, and then maybe they'll make some money and they'll give you some tiny part of that, maybe. And so, and my film cost over $1 million, and I would like to make that money back. I don't want to put it on some place that's going to give me $200 a month for, selling, selling streaming rights. So, anyway, so I've got a producer's rep, and we're talking about things, showing at a festival. Anyway, I guess I think your question was, have you thought about ways of getting some reach? And yeah, I guess the answer is just accept it. It's TikTok. It's placing ads on Facebook and Instagram. It's trying to reach out to influencers, and finding best practices. If I can make some limited edition gifts and give them to possible reviewers, and there's a lot of things we can do. And again, I think we all wish there was a machine that was doing this for us, but until you get um, to, I mean, we should all be part of some machine that's helping us, because being artists, it's really hard to do every single thing, write the show, rent the theater, sell the tickets, sell the popcorn, and sweep afterward, and the orchestra, and run the lights. It's hard to do everything yourself. So, uh, uh, anyway, so yeah, this is a year I really hope to become part of some machines, that are out there to make money off you, because that is how, if you think about anybody, Robert Redford or Paul Newman or Grace Kelly or anything, all these people were part of a huge machine, and we wouldn't know who they were if they stayed in their little towns and just did community theater.
What is this
So,
machine that you're referring to?
I mean, Hollywood, or the studio system or the agencies,
Mm.
as well as the social media machines, which are, kind of fickle, and the algorithms that they use can change kind of maliciously. But figuring those out, I just read an article about a company that says we don't market to people, we market to the algorithm. On TikTok, they don't care what people think; they care what the algorithm is going to do, because the algorithm determines whether another 1,000 people are going to be shown the thing.
That's a good
And
point.
it's a good point. It's both sad and it's just whatever. That's how the world is. We
Yeah,
have to,
it's very sad, and it is what it is.
yeah. And and it's also wishful thinking. Like all of us wish, some, you know, that we were one of the 12 stars back in 1950 or so, and it's just like, it's unrealistic. So we actually are way better off in many ways having all these, new outlets. And, uh, and I guess if we create work that's good enough, then someone will see that they can make some money off us and invite us into the bigger Hollywood machine. And whatever, we'll muddle through.
Yeah, got it. Interesting. And as far as getting exposure, I just went to this workshop in Miami that was talking about how important it is to get on stages. And so this is actually a stage. This is a digital stage being on podcast. So you're doing it, whether you realize it or not. And yeah, so if you think about any other podcast that you could possibly get on, and I don't know if you're much of a speaker as far as in person, but if you're looking for like physical stages and things like that. So yeah, I took this, it was a workshop, and it's also part of this course that's teaching me how to get on stages. And so it started by Grant Cardone. Have you ever heard of him?
Mm-hmm.
So he was talking to the group and mentioning that everybody that is anybody, like anybody that you've actually heard of, the reason you've heard of them is because of stages. So as you were mentioning, if you're alone in your room, you might know the secrets to the world, but you're not going to be able to make a change if you're not connecting with people and getting your story out there and inspiring people. And you're mentioning machines, and a machine that I would mention, that it's not an official one, but just having a support system and a network and people that believe in you. So like people who can champion you, that want to raise you up and let you be seen. So let's see. I don't know if I know people specifically that I would be able to introduce you to. That's how my mind works. I'm like, who can I introduce this person to?
Hmm.
But I'm going to be posting about my podcast on all of my social media and asking my friends to post for me as well. As you mentioned, influencers. So if I know an influencer, let's say they have 20,000 followers, I don't know if that counts as a lot, but let's
Or
up
I,
it.
sure.
Right. For me, it's a lot. Let's up it. Let's say 80,000. They have 80,000 followers. And if we have a good relationship, a good dynamic. And I ask, and they believe in me and they believe in my message. And if I ask them to post about my podcast, then let's say they do that. And then that's 80,000 people, depending on the algorithm. I don't know if all 80,000 people actually see their story or anything, but ideally all 80,000 see it. And then that's 80,000 people that may learn about your movie and then they could post. And the more people are inspired by what you're doing from there, it's all about just getting the word out. And you're only one person, but then, depending on how many people I know, and then all of those people also know people. So it's very possible to get the word out. And especially when it's something that people believe in, and everything that you talked about today is really inspiring. And I'm glad that you're on some level speaking to children so that we can help the younger generations grow up with good values, because sometimes they get them and sometimes they don't. And it's we can't control every message out there, and we can't influence every child out there, but we can do our part, that we're speaking what we believe in and if we think we're doing good. And yeah, so as long as we're doing our part, then the more people that do that and the more people that we influence to do good, then that will make a positive difference. And that's all we can do, I think.
Yeah, no, I mean, one thing that I notice, we live in a society just steeped with violence. Almost every film has got guns in it. Even kind of, interesting and progressive films like Black Panther, it's the way every single dispute is settled is by fighting to the death.
Mm.
And these are just terrible ideas. Like in our lives, you and I hopefully aren't carrying guns around. We're not threatening each other. And for the most part, we're walking and not being shot at. And, big parts of the world are a lot of times with, the American guns and ideas. But it's a terrible way to live. And it doesn't allow people to, live or create art or anything beautiful, or, have kids that aren't messed up. And so, yeah, I want to make films only about love and always without violence, because I just think it's a bad way to live. So, but I mean, because it's just stupid. We don't live that way. We don't, none of us go around, like I
Yeah,
did
like
when I was,
it's not a way to solve problems, and movies these
yeah.
days are showing that that is how to solve problems. So that's a really good point you're bringing up.
And then the same thing with superheroes. It's just like tedious to think like, if only I could have the power to burn holes in other people or slam cars in other people. And it's like, what about the power to like take care of yourself and your mental problems and then stand up for other people? Those are superpowers, as far as I'm
Oh my
concerned.
God, my heart. This is one of those moments I'm like, I want to write this down. I'm like, okay, good. I don't have to.
Well, hopefully. But it actually, you, this whole networking thing is interesting because it's, you, I don't know. I mean, I've never been super good. I'm kind of introverted person in some ways, and um, I don't consciously, keep up with people that I should because they might be valuable. But you just reminded me of someone I met at a networking event maybe 3 months ago, who just happens to have a TikTok channel with 1.5 million followers, and they're all children, and she does children's things. So
Oh.
if my film got on Hulu, one thing I'm really figuring out about publicity and everything is what is newsworthy. I met a nice film reviewer critic, and she said, "Look, even if I really liked you and I really wanted to watch your film and write about it, there would be no point because there's nothing for me to tell people to do. That's not like watch it on Hulu on March 4th,
Oh.
or it'll be in theaters on January 5th. Just a film that you can't see is not worth writing about." And so anyway, but the point is that if it were on on Netflix or something, and this woman with 1.5 million kid followers said, "Oh my God, you have to see this film," I mean, that would change everything. Um, the one influencer, actually, I just saw Seal, the great singer.
Mhm.
say that his song da 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 da
Yeah.
da da
Something
da.
about a rose. What is it called?
Yeah,
Steal Kiss from a Rose?
Kiss from the Rose. Yeah,
Yeah, it's one of my favorite songs.
it's he said that was on an album that just didn't go anywhere.
Mm.
And Joel Schumacher, said, "Hey, do you have any songs we could use in the Batman movie?" And he's like, "Well, sure. I mean, take any of them." And they tried it in a love scene, and Joel Schumacher said, "Yeah, it doesn't work there, but I love the song so much, I'm going to put it in the end credits."
Hmm.
And Seal said, his entire career, obviously, his career is, based on his creativity, etc. But in financial terms, it's
Mm.
all based on one guy, Joel Schumacher, picking up that song and putting it in the back of a Batman movie in the credits. And so, um, it's a funny world, like that's Seal is now part of a machine that can tour around the world,
Mm.
and because people see they can make money off it. And anyway, it's just. But on the other hand, if he'd kept those songs in his drawer and never shared them, even
Or
if
in
it
his
was,
head, if he never even created them, which some
yeah,
people are like that. Yeah.
so I saw something a couple of days ago, but it was something like, success or even creativity is like 1% talent and 99% consistency. That just doing
Wow.
every day is far more important than being born a genius or, whatever. There's so many ways that um, most geniuses will tell you, like, we're all normal. We all have good brains.
Mm.
If you really focus on physics or on piano playing or and some people are luckier than others and things are easier for them, but anyway, so we must make this year a consistent networking and and to get really comfortable with promoting yourself because you believe in what you're doing rather than it's really not about me anymore. It's about a thing that I made that's a message that I think is good for people, and I'm happy to promote that. um, a lot of us are real shy, or we're just like, you don't feel comfortable saying, "I'm so great, come look at me, give me money," you know. But I think if you get work out and finish a film or finish an album or get your actors reel together, you can just say, "She's so great," you know. Uh,
Yeah, we have to champion each other. It's so
yeah,
important.
for sure. No, that's the absolute best. I was so happy that I had friends who came to this Dances with Films festival in June and would pass out these postcards, and we had all these little ladybugs. Uh, I should show you my postcard, right? Oh, I can move this. Hold on. I can just walk around. Um, but we had, a lot of people were wearing little ladybugs on their faces because I had like hundreds of little ladybugs I got from China. Um, they would pass out these cards. This is a helmet
Nice.
that lets you connect to the universe. And then this is the main character's little sister. Um, and here's like, yeah, here's
Awesome.
the main. That's that's a space station in his mind. But this boy here is my son Sam when he was 8, and now he's 34, and he's an LA Times reporter. Uh, so this is what happens when you make a film for that many years. And then this is the poster I'm bringing to New York, which has him in the middle and all the other characters around. Space Baby. There's the evil nurse who works for the devil. There's their old ball player. There's Sophia. She's nature girl. She talks to animals. Then there's ladybugs all over. There's a squadron of ladybugs, and there's an evil crow, talking crow. Actually, I don't know if you can see it, but it works for the devil. And anyway,
That's
it's a
awesome.
challenge. Like, yeah, I'm not really a great graphic designer, and but I'll like hire people in India or ask friends to refer me to people. Or,
Yeah, I
you
know
know,
some graphic designers if you need. But what's the significance of the ladybugs?
uh, I'm really lazy. I think so. Like I'm working on a pirate comedy, and I saw a guy on Instagram who I actually I reached out to him. I said, "Man, you are an incredible character. It's so compelling." He calls himself a pirate bard, like he's a Shakespeare of pirates, and so he writes these beautiful poetic things to say, and he's just so good at it. And I said, you know, you have to be in my movie, but I'm too lazy to write a character for you. I want to you tell me your life story, and that's just going to be your life story, you know. And by chance, he grew up in Venezuela. He was singing in his mom's band when he was 4 years old, and they would go down to the beach and sing old slave songs. And he's just got an incredible, rich backstory, you know, that places him exactly in the right place to to be in this movie. Why was I telling you that though?
I asked you
Uh,
about ladybugs, the significance.
oh yeah. So anyway, this film I'm working on though is basically the film I made was based on my own kids, and so my daughter loved ladybugs, and she talks to animals, and we one thing one visual effect we could do is we bought 1,000 ladybugs from the local farm store for like $15, and then at one point we poured them on the evil nurse's face because they had a party on her. They cast a spell on her to put her to sleep so she wouldn't meddle with the climax of the film. And the ladybugs are dancing on her face. And so later I got some visual effects guys, and we just made the ladybugs are the guardians of the Holy Grail. Basically, they're the guardians of the pieces of the Holy Grail that was left over. That's what he builds his helmet out of. And but they're ladybug fighter pilots. And so I got my daughter's friends when they were like 10 years old. I got like, or maybe 12 by the time I was there. Got like 5 little girls over and stuffed them in a recording booth and made them do all the voices, bug fighter pilots. It's so cute.
Oh, that
Anyway,
is really cute.
this Brazilian friend of mine saw them and it's like, oh, I love the ladybugs so much. These are the best part of the movie. And so I hired some guys in India to make like 100 more ladybugs, and I put them into different scenes and have them say different things. And
Mm.
it's just it's like a magical realism kind of film, but it works, it makes sense.
Yeah, I'm glad you showed me those posters and and stuff because it gave me this perspective that I wasn't even realizing when you were first talking about it. So I got vibes of Karate Kid and Home Alone, and I realized that I don't know if it has anything to do with the movie or if it's just because it's kind of old school. And then I remembered that it was actually filmed back in the day. So
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
going, I think it has the potential to be a cult classic because it's going to have all of this nostalgia feeling to it, even though it's new.
yeah. That's like Stranger Things. Like it would have been easier if they just made it 26 years ago, and then took it out of the vault, instead of getting old cars. No, like this thing doesn't. It looks like it was filmed yesterday. There's only a single car in the film, and it's actually a classic like sports car, a Lotus.
Wow.
Um, and the clothes are just regular clothes. So there's nothing like people. It was the funniest thing to have, and it'll be the same thing in New York because my son is coming. But you see this 8-year-old kid. He's the main character, and he's just this little great little actor and little genius. And then at the end for the Q&A, this 6'2", 34-year-old guy comes out, and I was like, "What? How is that possible?" So it does have but people were like, it just feels like it has this nostalgic feel to it, even though they didn't understand it,
Wow.
but it's before cell phones. I mean, it's before iPhones at least, and
Hmm.
before all the internet changed our lives. Um, so
Wow. Really cool. I'm so excited to see it. So let me see what other questions I have for you. Um, we definitely have touched on this stuff a bit, but as far as chakras and balance goes, I was curious which chakras you feel tend to be balanced and tend to be unbalanced for you. I think there's a lot of people that have kind of a go-to, like for instance, just to give you an example, I've moved around a lot. So my root chakra, which is sense of stability, sense of home, sense of security, that one has been a bit imbalanced. And that's kind of like a chronic thing that's been true for me for the past 10 years or so. So I'm just curious if you have any that tend to be balanced or tend to be imbalanced.
Well, yeah, I don't have these chakras memorized, and I
Oh,
don't
I
think.
wrote them down for you.
Yeah, no, I don't, and I don't think about it a lot. But I'll tell you, um, the so if the crown is spirituality, the third eye is intuition, and throat is self-expression or voice. Um, I feel like all of those are like my life is pretty great. I really do. I mean, when you see this film or, in our discussion of it, I mean, in my songs, I mean, they're all, they're about spirituality and intuition and compassion and empathy and self-expression through my voice is what I do all the time. Um, Heart, compassion, love is, yeah, kind of what I'm about. The identity and personal power. Um, I don't think about it too much, except that, like I said, in on one level, my life is great, and fingers crossed, knock on wood, things are going okay. But as far as personal power to, broker a peace agreement in the Middle East, or to lobby for prison reform, or schools to be funded, there's like I wish I was had Beyonce's resources and I could create an enormous lobbying enterprise that would try to change our lawmakers' ideas about what matters. Because right now they just take money from people and they say, oh, well, whatever the pharmaceutical industry wants, whatever the military, the weapons manufacturers want. And they need to be shamed into actually doing their jobs because they don't, um, our legislatures don't represent the people anymore and what the people want because they represent what money wants and big money. So I wish I had more power to try to influence that because there's a lot of suffering in the world that comes from our militarism and our terrible schools and our breaking down infrastructure and our, you know, wages and housing that is too expensive. And, so yeah, I don't have as much personal power as I want. Creativity, sexual energy, money are all luckily, great, fine. Although if I had $1 billion, I would do something with it. And
You're
then
like, I could
security,
use more of it, but I have some.
yeah. And then security and home. I've always been a super homebody. I stayed in my last place like 30 years. I moved here 6, 7 years ago and just stayed in one place. The and I actually do like to travel, but I really like to have a home base. And
You said you
so,
do like or you would like?
no, no, I do.
You do,
It's really
yeah.
important to me to have a home
Mhm.
base. It's, I have a friend who's living out of a suitcase now, and and she's just traveling the world and staying on
Mm.
friends' couches and things, and she's getting a little tired of it, but I would be really tired of it. But even when I go travel, I'd like to go someplace and just stay in one place for a week or two, and not really worry about tourist things, and just
Mm.
find a home base.
Make a home out of it. Yeah, wow. So it sounds like the root chakra is really important to you.
Yeah, so I would say all these things are balanced. It's just that I have ambitions to, get better at everything, um, and because I think yeah, like you're either living or dying, get busy growing or decaying, and
Hmm.
I try to um, stay busy and creative.
Yeah, beautiful. Right now, I don't know how many listeners I'll have, but let's say people see my film and then I become really popular and people go back and watch my early episodes.
Yeah,
So if people are listening to you, let's assume they're listening to you, what's your message that you're itching to get out to the world?
I'll give you two. So my son was given an assignment for the LA Times to ask people if you could do one thing for LA or change one thing, for the LA's future, what would it be? And I think the biggest problem LA has is not reining in rents. I think just because you can charge people $5,000 a month for a one-bedroom apartment, and then you can have 50,000 homeless people, doesn't mean you should. And And just because, a company like BlackRock can buy hundreds of thousands of homes from people and then treat it like a big investment portfolio, I don't think you should. So I think, you could limit the number of units that one person owns to 50, you know, or 10. If you own more than 10 units, you're subject to rent control. And rent shouldn't be going up 3% a year. It should be going down 10% a year, because nobody needs to make millions and millions of dollars and then all of us struggle to pay rent, and tens and tens of thousands are on the street. Because a lot of people say the biggest problem with LA is homeless people. And it's like, they're not a problem. It's the rent that they can't pay. If rent was $400 a month, which it used to be not long ago, everyone can afford that, you know?
Yeah,
So
wow, good point.
I think then, yeah, and it'd just be a prosperous, safe place if rents were back to what they were in the 70s or something. I mean, because even with inflation, like when I got out of college, I rented a 4-bedroom place in East Cambridge for $400, and I lived with a friend. Um, and now that same place would be $6,000,
Mm,
and I made 60,000 a year starting out, which is kind of what you make these days. So, and salaries haven't gone up 10 times, but rent has gone up 15 times, and it's just not fair for anybody, except landlords. And big corporations. But worldwide, I mean, the obviously most important thing would be to stop the the climate change and military are really tied together. Like the U.S. military is one of the biggest creators of climate change. These ships and jets that they have will burn like thousands of gallons of fuel per hour, or
mm,
per minute. Um, and the anyway, it seems like our military exists to kind of support the oil industry
mm.
and keep those pipelines open, or those shipping lines. And as long as that exists, as long as we focus all our efforts, most of our country's efforts are on military things, um, then the earth is really doomed. And as long as our decision makers are all bribed, the earth is really doomed, because everyone's just going to make decisions based on who bribes them the most. So, my message for the world would be, wake up, actually look at alternate news sources, certainly about what's going on in the Middle East, uh, and and just begin to learn how these decisions get made. Why, we could make a decision. I got to meet AOC when she came to LA for a visit. You know,
Who was that?
Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez,
Oh,
the great young Congress member.
mhm.
And you get the sense that if there were 535 of her in Congress, um, of women who are former bartenders who aren't taking bribes, they'd say there's no threat to America from other countries. Why do we have this military like this? Why don't we cut 90% of that and put it into schools? And why do we why don't we have healthcare for everybody? Why does these health executives make $40,000 per hour while they're denying healthcare to everybody? We just make a lot of bad decisions based on our legislators being bribed. So, I mean, there's a lot of messages, but they're mostly wake up and start learning about how the world works, because um, the more we make it not work for them, the more we shame them or vote them out of office, um, the better chance we'll have of surviving as not just our species, but lots of species are going to die in the next few hundred years.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah, I was just watching, what was it? It was, I forget what it's called, but it was some documentary that Morgan Freeman is the narrator for, about the history of evolution and things. And I forget if you said this or if my dad told me, because I was watching it with my dad, but I think it's that 99% of animals that have existed in the history of the world, that 99% are extinct, and that it's like mostly because of man, like it started when man evolved. So, yep, that doesn't surprise me.
yeah, and a world without tigers, and with it's same as like a world with a bunch of guns. Everyone has guns, and instead of building things and creating things and building roads and houses, the guys with guns and missiles and things tear things down. It's just like that's the last way we should want to live. And same with, no tigers, no elephants, no, there's just so many gorgeous things. It's such a great planet. But those of us who appreciate it aren't fighting hard enough against those who just don't give a damn, because they're making so much money, whether it's selling weapons or oil or, cars or whatever. So yeah, it's I think I think because propaganda works so well to convince people to do stupid things, I'm hoping that we can figure out how to make it work well to convince people to do things that are good for all of us.
Yeah. I think it starts with somebody who is very confident and has the wisdom, has figured, like I was talking about earlier, like someone who figures it out, but then who doesn't stay in their room. And I mean, you could stay in your room if you're on Zoom, right? If you're on the internet, but somebody who actually gets the word out. So that being said, imagine you're the most powerful person in the world. You have all the influence and you're telling the world this message. What's the actionable step that somebody could take? Because there's so many people, before you answer the question, there's so many people that are just feeling lost because they're consuming media from all different sources and everything is getting jumbled together and they don't know what to do. They don't even trust themselves to make the right decision. So they listen when somebody tells them what to do. So to add to one of those positive influences and positive voices out there, what's something actionable that somebody who they're a good person, but they just don't know what to do? What can they do?
Wow. I mean, first would be to stop hating. There's so much trying to divide us, black, white, Jewish, Muslim, just stupid shit that nobody in real life, there's no real problem. It could all be beautiful, whether you're whatever religion, whatever color, it shouldn't matter at all. But there's a lot of forces trying to tell us that we have enemies out there.
Mm,
Uh, but the reason that happens is because the very rich can rob us better. If we're convinced that, oh my God, if we had socialized medicine and everyone had health care, it would doom the country. If we had, better schools, it would doom the country because it doesn't benefit the rich. So all that's happened since like 1970, 1980 is this trillions of dollars of wealth transfer to this tiny, tiny slice. There didn't used to be billionaires,
I didn't
and
know that. The 1% is a new thing, relatively.
yeah, totally. And it's that, 0.1% that has billions and billions of dollars. Um, that's happened because they used to tax people. If you made over $10 million, they would say, look, obviously this only exists, that your wealth only exists because of the community that we built, the roads, the telephones, and the internet, whatever. If you think you can make money on your own and you did it, go live on the moon. Nothing uh, no one's success is their own. It's all because there's a community. And if you made over $10 million a year, they say, well, you should give 90% of that back to the community because we paid for the roads, we paid for the schools that educated the people to be able to buy your product, et cetera. And people were okay with that, paying 90% of the money. And then Reagan came along and they're like, screw that. Let's give zero or as close to nothing back to the community as
Hmm.
possible. And so when you see people driving around $500,000 cars and teenagers driving around Maseratis in Beverly Hills, it's because their parents weren't taxed properly.
Mm.
And so what should be going into the community, into roads, schools, things being better, they're, mental health thing, healthcare, whatever, they're going into the pockets of the rich and they have all these luxuries. And we worship that in America. That's who we worship. Any rich person we think has wisdom, and they must be blessed. But it's wrong. Uh, anyway. So the follow the money is, I guess, always the answer. Like really look at who's making money off their propaganda that makes you hate the Chinese now, or the Russians now, or the Muslims now. There's someone trying to take your eye off. Talking about trans people or anything like that. They're trying to take your eye away from what's really happening, which is that we're all getting robbed. We have all these monopolies, all these predatory capitalists, the rent we pay, all these ways. the education, Americans, being two or $300,000 in debt so they can go to college. No other country on the planet
Mm.
does. Um, Americans think we've got it good, and we've really got it, among the worst of the most developed countries. Um, so follow the money, and when you feel despairing, uh, know that it's because there's we're all basically, instead of all of us living as a community and thinking about what community goods do we want, schools, roads, art centers, supporting artists, it's not going that way. It's just going into the pockets of the very wealthy, because there's the big picture, but there's also everyone's personal picture, which is that you need to spend less than you make. You cannot live on credit cards. That 30% interest that they charge was illegal for all of human history.
Mm.
In Massachusetts, where I was for years, there's a 6% cap on interest. Anything beyond that is considered usury and
Mm.
illegal. But South Dakota said, how about 29.97%? And so, just an example, I had a 90-year-old aunt that I reconnected with when I moved to LA. She was living on $6 a day because she had borrowed $10,000 10 years ago. And she had paid that 10,000 off once, twice, three times, four times, five times, I think, in the end, because they were charging a 30% interest. And
Mm-hmm.
they hadn't paid it off. So she'd bought her granddaughter some clothes because they were poor for a while, and she's paid $50,000. And so she could either decide to have a cheeseburger that day or something else. But that was it. $6 a day was all that was left to her after her credit card bill.
Mm-hmm.
That's it is criminal, and it should be considered criminal. But it's like, hey, banks made $100 million more in profit by stealing from little old ladies. So if I was, super powerful, I would, dissolve I would get a different set of Congress people in there who aren't all bribed. Just change the laws about, can you accept bribes as a judge? We're seeing that the Supreme Court is accepting bribes. All if a 5-year-old could know, if you get bribed to make a decision, you're not going to make a good decision.
Mm-hmm.
So, hey, here's $1,000, decide my way. A judge isn't going to make a good decision. And we live in a world where we allow our legislators to be bribed. So that's why things suck for a lot of us. And I'm super grateful that, I'm kind of have my head above water at this point in my life, which wasn't always true.
Mm-hmm.
And I really feel for everybody else who is still trying to figure that out, because it's getting harder and harder. And imagine as an actress, if you could pay $300 a month rent, you work a couple of days, in some job, and your rent is covered, instead of, you can still do that if you live like 6 to a room,
Mm.
right? Which is what a lot of us decide to do. But it just shouldn't be this hard. And
Right.
we can change it. These are all government policies that allow this to happen. So,
But how do we change it? So is it just by voting? Like,
well,
what's the
I,
step that, like, what can I actually do, let's say, to
I think
change this?
the first is educating yourself and really trying to get your own stuff together, so that you have the time. Like, if you spend more than you make, and you're not able to put away money, you're always going to be desperate, and you're not going to have your wits about you to protest. So, in America, we don't have any like paid leave. In European countries, you start out a job the day one, you get 5 weeks of paid leave. Your vacation, 5 weeks of vacation, and a month of health leave or whatever. They're just like, that's what human beings should have. And if you have a baby, you can take a year off. In America, it's like, no way, you don't get any time off. This is our money. You don't deserve anything. Even though you make me all the money that I make as an employee, you don't get to keep any of it. So we have to ourselves manage our lives as if we deserved 5 weeks vacation, or as if basically, if you spend less than you make and you start saving up money, you have $10,000, $50,000 in the bank, 100,000, you can begin to step back and decide what matters to you, rather than just jump from job to job to job, or stay with something that doesn't work. It is, calling Congress people, telling them that you're dissatisfied with the way they're funding, more weapons transfers, or whatever it is, and making noise because an engineer friend of mine, when I was complaining about the way things, happen in this country, was saying, "Hey, look, just remember this: the system works for them. You get into Congress and you get your $1 million in bribes a year, and then your pension for life. How are you going to make decisions if the pediatricians union and all these different doctors unions give you $1 million a year? Are you ever going to decide that, oh, instead of making $1 million a year, these doctors should only make 500,000 a year? No, because those guys give you all your money. And so the system works for them. You have to remember that. And so the only way things will change is if we make the system not work for them.
Mm.
If we allow Clarence Thomas to take bribes in the Supreme Court, then they will continue making decisions that are based on him being bribed. And there's several of them who are taking bribes. All Congress people take bribes, these campaign contributions. So as long, if we can shame them, if we can highlight this, every once in a while some rep will be caught red-handed taking bribes the wrong way. But there's so many ways that there's money in politics. Bernie and AOC and a couple of say, look, we only take $30. Like my $30 that I give to AOC is not going to influence her to buy weapons, and give them to some poor African country,
Mm-hmm.
So basically, politics is so ugly and so complicated and dirty that we're just like, I want to stay away from it. But it's beginning to really change our lives. If you're gay, if you're Mexican, or you're Muslim, or whatever, if you're on the border, it can, you can be treated almost like you're in a fascist country and be put into cages, and or if you cross dress in some states in Tennessee, you can be put in jail now. So it affects.
I did not know that. Wow.
Yeah, they're like, I mean, I'll just tell you, my fondest hope is that Space Baby gets banned in the state of Florida because it talks about Black history. Right? It's outlawed. You can't talk about slavery and the history of slavery. And there's a little of that in my film.
Wow.
And so if my film got banned, then it would be controversial and I'd get some press, But it's those are all government actions, and it's getting ideally you have a government that's just kind of, leaves you alone and you leave it alone, and they get the streets fixed and they police kindly, and they're not, unkind to people and shooting them more than they should. But we have now got a kind of cancerous government that, it's always going to make decisions wrong because of the money involved.
Yeah.
And even though we'd much rather not get involved, I feel like in some ways we have to. I mean, actually, I'll just say this: my son's creative writing teacher at Brown University saw my film, and he said, "This is the most politically astute film I've ever seen in my life." So I studied politics at college, so I guess that's why I am passionate about it. But it really does matter. So yeah, getting involved, just paying attention, thinking about your vote. What if your people you're voting for are just working for the billionaire class or working for the little people?
Yeah, so I was wondering, how could somebody get educated in a way that is unbiased? So not only educated, but then how could they find out who's taking bribes?
I mean, if you Google that, like what, campaign contributions of, in the United States, there's websites that will show you this. And what's really interesting is that most companies and organizations give money equally to both sides, because they're like, we don't care who's in power as long as you don't give everybody, health care. We don't care who's in power as long as you don't stop all our big military spending. We'll just give money to both sides. It's very cynical. They don't have any beliefs. They just want to influence the votes so that our tax dollars get funneled to them. There's a really one I love is there was a Harvard professor who used to be the Secretary of the Treasury named Robert Reich, R-E-I-C-H. And he is just goes out of his way to explain things in a really comprehensible way. Just kind of give a picture of how the world works, because he was among the class. I went to Harvard, and and so that class of yeah, that class of people run the world. And so we know firsthand how Wall Street works to steal money from people.
Mm.
And the and he, he's far smarter than I am. There, if you started with someone like him, Robert Reich, just it really began to open up your eyes about um, it's all about power. Basically the things, there's no democracy really. There's power and money. And ideally we would have democracy and that little people would have a voice. I went to a meeting of, even in the small level, of Los Angeles artists. LA every once in a while will say we're going to invest in the
Was that a cat walking on the piano?
it was this is oh Chubby, she ran away. Baby, her name is Baby Groot. um but there was a neighborhood group saying, like, how can LA will say, like, let's spend money on arts, and then they'll say, let's give several $1 million to Frank Gehry and some other famous artist, and we'll call that spending money on arts. It's like, well, what about all the Latino people, all the Black people, all the little guys who live here? Why couldn't they spend a little on them? And one proposal is that since retail is changing and Amazon is taking over everything, there's a lot of empty stores now. And it'd be really cool if the city said, you know what, let's make this safer for a owner to allow a pop-up art gallery or a pop-up
Ooh.
nightclub or a pop-up, place to do plays, right? If you saw an empty store, you can go and say, look, is it possible I could get 50 chairs in here and, for 1 month, put on a little concert? They might say yes, but they
Love
also
that.
might say, yeah, but you got to get insurance. And then you might find insurance is hard or not. I don't, I've heard different stories. But what if the city said, well, we want to promote that. We want to allow people, while their places are empty, to have artists use them. We'll provide the insurance, like, you prove that you're a decent person and you're not going to destroy a place.
Mm.
And, and pay, $200 for the month, and we'll provide the assurances to the owner. That would be really cool. That would be a great way for LA to spend a few $1 million creating an insurance fund for artists using empty storefronts.
Mm.
I thought that was a really interesting idea.
Yeah.
And so there was someone running for city council at that meeting, and voting for him, might lead to that kind of thing where it really affects our lives.
Mhm.
And then, we believe, I believe people do need music and drama and art. It really helps make life whatever, more inspiring.
Richer.
Rich.
Yeah, more
Yeah.
inspiring, richer. Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
totally.
so actually, speaking of which, at that place, I met a guy who makes these it's called lucid dreaming, I think. I just remembered it, if you can Google that. But he's made a kind of guitar that it's actually like a almost a tablet, but those drawing things that people use for art, what do you call it? A drawing pad, a tablet, I guess. Anyway, but he's like made a guitar, and he creates these virtual worlds where he's growing trees out of the ground wherever he presses a button, and it's just like this crazy trippy thing. And I was just talking to my publicist for my film, and she handles a pretty famous guitar player, and we were talking about how visually boring jazz usually is. Like,
Mm.
I jazz singer friends and musicians, and I'm helping some of them create promotional things. And obviously they can move a little bit, they can smile a little bit, that'd be good. But if there was like this big screen and stuff that was, being created, reacting to the music, it could just be a whole different experience. And that came from a group of artists who are looking for spaces, meeting, and then me just randomly saying, I should just go to this networking thing. What
Mm.
who might I meet? And so now I'm able to introduce this artist to this really famous guitarist,
Mm.
and we might do some collaboration together. So
Awesome.
yeah. So anyway, the point is, I guess, get out, talk to people. That's the biggest thing, is don't stay and just watch TV all the time.
Yeah,
That's
I want to add to that. It sounds like a combination of the things that we've been saying is that the world needs our help, like people who are actually good people and light workers and artists and creative people who have the collective's best interest in mind. So that being said, we have to educate ourselves to know what's actually going on and think for ourselves instead of just listening to what somebody who sounds really confident is telling us. We have to actually learn for ourselves and get the word out there and get educated about politics, as boring as it is for some people, including me. It's really important, and keep creating.
Well, yeah, and honestly, I'm I'm so proud of you for doing this. It's, because we all talk about doing stuff like this, and it it is so 1% is that you're charming and smart and all that, right? 99% is going to be consistency, you know. And you've got it. You can definitely do this. You got the idea, and so putting, just saying I'm going to do it every week, would be huge. I really, really hope you do, because uh, I really like the approach of um, just whatever, this you're a good-hearted person, and the an approach not about fame and whatever. It's really about spirit. I mean, I think it's hard to be spiritual or community minded if you're not thinking about the good of other people, and that's so I'm really impressed and proud of you. And I
Thank you.
here's
I'm laughing because I see a cattail.
how
Oh, there it
beautiful.
is. Oh, so cute.
I I've been calling her Chubby for several years, but I have these friends who said I must call her by her real name, which is Baby Groot.
Oh.
I don't want to give her a complex.
Wow,
Uh,
she's really cute.
yeah, she's
So,
like a mobile hot water bottle. She's the best. She'll sit on your lap for like 16 hours at a time.
wow, that's a very long time.
Yeah, no, you can't up. It's tough.
Yeah. So, yeah, thank you for the compliments and the faith. And that's a really good point that I might as well schedule my next one. So, when I said I had to just put a date, the truth was my date that I put was like about 2 weeks from now. So when I reached out to you, um, I was I wasn't really planning on it happening so quickly. It was kind of me just like, okay, I have to get started. And then because you had a time constraint since you're going to New York to premiere your film, right, for the East Coast.
December
Um,
3rd, spacebaby.com. If anyone has listened this long, I wish we could give them $100 for all that time they put in.
I
But
wish.
spacebaby.com, there's a link to buy tickets for the December 3rd showing. And it's yeah, it's a truly spiritual, uplifting, mind-blowing, wacky experience. And you'll meet other good people when you come.
That sounds so great. And then my other question for you is, for people who can't make it to that premiere, how can we watch this? I'm dying to watch this.
It's always a question. I sometime in the next, during 2024, absolutely, it'll be somewhere. It'll be on Tubi, on Hulu, on Amazon, on an airplane. I mean, but right now, I guess it's important. I mean, you can't even put things in festivals if you've screened it for lots of people. And so unfortunately, um, you could go to my my Instagram, which is at rex.dean, and I post about the film and little snippets of the film. Spacebaby.com has a trailer that's really, you see how interesting, and the quality of it, and the mystery of it. It's a really fun kind of adventure mystery that's also funny. Um, and and stay in touch so that when it's ready. I mean, one thing we may do is try to raise $100,000 for the promoting it into some theaters. Usually, big films spend $50 million, so 100,000, would get one billboard and a few ads. But I think it could really make a big difference, and then you would be able to download it that way. So by just I like you, I don't have 20,000 followers yet. Um, so I think I might have 1,000 or 100. I don't know, but
1,000 or 100.
I don't know. but just Rex Dean, like the Tyrannosaurus, and James Dean, if you remember that. Um, just follow me, and I'll usually follow you back, especially our Hollywood friends. Um, and I will definitely let you know, because uh, yeah, it's wild to see something that was made in 19. Oh, my battery's running out.
We're almost
Uh,
done.
in 1997, we shot it, and before a lot of you were born, probably. Uh, so anyway, thank you so much. And I'm sorry it's not widely available, but I'm doing my utmost, and I will make that happen.
Yeah, it will be. And once it does come out, I'll be promoting it all over my social media for you.
Thank you so much.
You're
It's really
welcome.
meeting you, and I will see you again soon.
Yeah, sounds lovely. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for inventing a podcast for me to be on.
Okay, bye, Dean. Bye, Dean. Bye, Rex.
That's
Rex
okay.
Dean. Bye, Rex Dean.
Bye, James Aronson. See you later.